We are now in the thick of the 2014 election cycle, and as sure as the sun rises in the east, there are hundreds, thousands of letters and emails being sent out to raise money on the hot button issues. And oh my goodness, a lot of them can't really do anything except raise money.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome to the show, friend. This is a two-part series on the 501c3 tax-exempt status. And we have to pull this one out because, well, it's a way to wake up and warn and advise fellow Christians about some of the duplicity and flat-out deception, and even sometimes treachery, but for sure duplicity, that is rampant in 501c3 tax-exempt religious organizations that springs up during the election cycle. Now, I know a lot of the people that are in this world, and we're going to focus on a book written by a couple of authors today called We Won't Get Fooled Again. I know a lot of these people, and I know that they care very deeply about the issues that they are talking about. Child killing, marriage, the wickedness of the Obama administration. But the problem is that because they have agreed to form a not-for-profit corporation under the guidelines of the federal government, particularly the 501c3 tax-exempt, tax-deductible structure of tax law, they have agreed to take a bit and a bridle and a muzzle, put it on their face, and not do the critical things of naming names. If you look throughout the scriptures and if you look throughout church history, you will see that prophets and righteous men and women throughout the ages have named the names of the villains of their day. And that's exactly what they can't do if they have agreed to abide by the rules of a 501c3 tax-exempt, tax-deductible organization. So, tragically, they will send out fundraising letters and ask for money and say, we're going to make a difference this year and we're going to raise a cry, but they just can't do it. Legally, they can't do it. Their lawyers are saying, don't say this, don't say that. And so it ends up having very, very little impact. And they just raise a lot of money. So I'm not trying to be unkind. I want to win. I wish that all of them would get rid of their 501c3 tax-exempt status and just get in the fight and throw real political punches. That would be awesome. But until then, I invite you to watch this show and to learn what's really going on. We're going to have a philosophical, theological, political cleansing. If you will listen to the words that I'm about to tell you, if you will embrace the truth and let it flush through your mental system, you'll be stronger, you'll be better, you'll be fit for battle, and maybe, just maybe, be healed, come off of the sick bed of the political coma that has come over so many of American Christians. All right, we've been betrayed, all right? I want you to understand me. We in the Christian community have been betrayed. We have been betrayed by our leaders. I'm talking about evangelical superstars, Catholic bishops and priests. I'm talking about 501c3 tax-exempt groups in Washington, D.C. And in the next segment of the show, I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit more detail. But before I do, I have to give you the historical and theological premise by which I am going to, as graciously as possible, expose the collaborators that are in our midst. Let me begin with one of my heroes from the American Revolution, Patrick Henry. Most school children are familiar with one of the most famous English-speaking speeches of all time, "Give me liberty," or "Give me death." What most people don't know is that, number one, it was an impromptu speech. And number two, perhaps more importantly, it was given as a response, and some people at the time would have believed as an attack on what two other men in St. John's Church had said. You see, there were two very wealthy, well-respected men in the room of the Rump Parliament that basically said, let's send another petition to the king. Let's treat with the king one more time. And Patrick Henry stood up and said, in so many words, we are in an hour of crisis, and I hope that no one will be offended by what I'm about to say. And then his whole speech is an attack on their subservience, on their fear, on their unwillingness to fight, on their duplicity, on their folly that they would think that the king would even listen to them. He said, why does he need all these warships in Boston? Who are you kidding that you think we could discuss this with the king anymore? Now is the time to fight. But before he could finish his argument, he had to demolish theirs. And historians almost universally agree that it's very likely that the American Revolution would have been strangled in the cradle if Patrick Henry had not prevailed at that moment with his argument. Because his argument caused Virginia to arm. And Virginia was central to victory for the 13 colonies. Because Patrick Henry had the courage and the integrity to oppose with manly firmness those who were giving arguments to compromise and just let's have a seat at the table with the king. Person number two, William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison is, without question, the most famous leader in America for the abolitionist movement in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, right till slavery was abolished. When William Lloyd Garrison took the helm of the nascent abolitionist movement, or at least was nascent in the sense of coalescing to become a national force, the first thing he did was to demolish a so-called anti-slavery society, which was nothing more than collaborators with the slaveholders. He wrote a book in which he showed that this other organization, basically it was the national right to life of their day, showing that they, in fact, had no intention or desire to abolish slavery. They wanted gradual emancipation. They wanted to send the slaves to Haiti or to Liberia. They wanted to reimburse those poor slaveholders for the money that they would lose. But they did not call for the immediate, unconditional release of all people held in bondage. That's what the ethical thing to do was. That's what the demand of heaven was. And it's exactly what they did not want to do. And so William Lloyd Garrison set about showing that, number one, this anti-slavery group were in fact made up of collaborators with the slaveholders. And number two, he set about to destroy them. And he did. And that's why the cry of abolition was finally unified and was clear, not muddled and compromised. The third illustration I want to give is from the last century. One of the greatest men who ever lived, in my opinion, and certainly the towering figure of the last century, and that is Winston Spencer Churchill. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of England right as France fell. Most people know that Churchill stood alone in the face of Nazi aggression before America got into the war, and England obviously with him. But what most of us forget is that France and Britain were allies. And when France collapsed, they sent a letter, a message to Churchill and said, what do we do? And Churchill gave them leave to exit the treaty that they had. Churchill simply said this: make the best terms you can and you must surrender the French fleet to us immediately. England, as an island race, depended upon her navy. And with the menace of German U-boats, submarines, the Germans were slowly strangling the Brits, who needed foreign food, textiles, metals, ammunition from America, etc. If Germany got the French fleet and could actually engage in open war with the Brits, then it could have cost the English their lives and forced them to surrender, because the French at that time had the second largest navy in the world. The French cut their deal with Hitler, but then did not turn over the navy. Churchill issued an ultimatum and said every ship must be turned over to us within 48 hours. The French did not comply. And Winston Spencer Churchill, Prime Minister of England, made what he later in life said was probably the most horrific decision he ever had to make, one that haunted him to his grave. Namely, he ordered the sinking of the French fleet. He sent his fellow allies, former allies, the French sailors that were on those ships, to their watery graves. He didn't want to do it, but he knew that if the Nazis got those ships, that England might not survive. Now, I tell you these things because I'm about to play the role, at least ideologically, of Patrick Henry and William Lloyd Garrison and Winston Churchill, and to show that we have people who have tried to cut deals with tyrants, who have looked the other way while we have been enslaved, who have actually facilitated the takeover or the silencing of great guns that should have been used to fire upon the enemy, and now, slowly but surely, they're being trained on us. If we are going to prevail to get the country back, because let's face it, we've lost control of this country into the hands of wicked men. If we're going to prevail and get it back, we have got to expose and then slowly get rid of the collaborators that are in our midst. Don't go away. I'll be right back, showing how we have been betrayed.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah?
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
Welcome back to the Voice of Resistance. It is I, your servant, Randall Terry. The movement of the religious right, pro-family, pro-life, pro-marriage, the movement of the religious right became the religious right establishment. The religious right establishment became the religious right industry, involving enormous sums of money. And the religious right industry became collaborators. Follow the line of logic. People started off, they were fighting for what they believed was true and right, just, babies' lives, the sacrament of marriage, the covenant of marriage, the institution of marriage, what people say is the bedrock of civilization. But then, some of these leaders, either because their Christianity was very shallow, or because they started to want a place at the table, They started to fall in love with the praise of men. Some of them began to compromise the principles and the very laws of God. I want you to contact us. If you'll just pay for the shipping and handling, a gift of any size, as long as you pay for the shipping and handling, I will send you this brand new blockbuster book called We Won't Get Fooled Again. This book shows the treachery, the betrayal, the sellouts that have happened from groups like, and this is going to be painful to hear, remember what I said about Churchill and William Lloyd Garrison and Patrick Henry, from groups like Focus on the Family, Family Research Council, Richard Land and the Southern Baptists, Christian Coalition. Friends, we have been betrayed. Get this book. It documents it with their own words. The authors of the book interview the key players of the establishment, of the industry, over the last 20 or 25 years. And some people might say, well, Randall, who are you to talk about some of this stuff? I led the largest civil disobedience movement in American history. I have been on their TV shows. I used to go to their meetings until I wasn't invited anymore because they realized that I wouldn't go along with the games, with the compromise, and with a slavish devotion to the Republican Party. We have been sold out. That is why this country has been lost from the hands of righteous men and women, because our leaders sold us out. They became collaborators. And if we're going to get the country back, we've got to be free from this collaboration. Get this book, all right? A gift of any size. And if you can't afford any money, just pay for the shipping and handling. I'll send it to you for free. Because we've got to free ourselves from those who have betrayed us. We've got to get the French ships out of the hands of the Nazis, okay? I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about sacrifice. We're going to talk about honor. We're going to talk about what you're going to do to help bring this ship of state around. And we're going to talk about Hobby Lobby. God bless them. Don't go away. I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. Welcome back to the Voice of Resistance, friend. It is I, your servant, Randall Terry. If you were to face God tonight, God forbid that you died suddenly in a car wreck or had a heart attack, and God said to you, what did you do to save America from the hands of wicked men? What would you say? If you had to give an account for what you did to stop babies from being murdered, what would you say? You see, in the old confession of sin, it says, I have sinned, I have greatly sinned through my own fault in what I have thought and what I've said, in what I've done, and what I've failed to do. What I have failed to do. Think with me about the parable of the Good Samaritan. The man is dying in the ditch. The priest and the Levite, they walk by on the other side. Babies are dying in the ditch of America's abortion mills. Marriage is lying, bleeding in the ditch. Christian values, the 10 Commandments being ripped out of public locations. And most of the Christian community is like the priest and the Levite. Just keep walking by on the other side of the road. Oh, we're going to have a prayer service for the 10 Commandments. Oh, we're going to pray for the babies. Oh, I'm going to write a song called Dying in the Ditch. It moved me to tears. But it was the Samaritan who saved the man's life. And so when we come back, I'm going to talk about Hobby Lobby and what it really means to sacrifice. But my question for you is this. What are you doing? What are you willing to do? What are you going to do? Do you hear the call of the Spirit of God in your heart? Do you hear the cry of innocent blood from the ground? Do you see the faces and hear the voices of Christian men and women who have gone before you for hundreds of years to give to you what was the greatest republic in the history of the human race since ancient Israel? Do you hear? Do you see? And if so, what are you going to do? God is looking for the weak and the foolish to overturn the mighty and the so-called wise of this world. Will you say to him, "Here am I, Lord, send me"? I'll be right back. Because he cleaves to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble and will rescue him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. When I was a prisoner in a prison work camp in Alpharetta, Georgia, I had a lot of time on my hands to research who the bad guys were in the death of our culture. And I wrote Accessory to Murder. It is an overview of our political, cultural, media, and religious adversaries that are accomplices to the death of our culture. I encourage you, get a copy of this and learn the who's who of the bad guys. The question is, when is the storm of iniquity that is overrunning this country going to subside? Friend, that in part depends upon us. And part of what it depends on is our courage, our willingness to sacrifice, our willingness to pick up our cross and to suffer shame with Christ and not demand that everything go well and that we be happy. Jesus said, take up your cross and die. And what that means is sometimes we have to have people hate us. Look at what is happening right now to Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby could soon be fined $1.3 million per day because the Christian owners have the courage to say, we will not fund the murder of innocent human beings through the pill or through Plan B or the morning after pill. They're standing for Christ. They're standing for human life. And guess what? It's the spirit of martyrdom. It's causing them hardship. It's causing them suffering. And please understand this. This is part of what it means to be a Christian. Jesus said, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for that's the way they treated the false prophets. But he said, in both the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, he said, blessed are you when men hate you, when they revile you, when they cast your name out as evil, when they persecute you. He said, that's the way they treated the prophets who were before you. He said, in that day rejoice, leap for joy. Great is your reward in heaven. And so, friend, we have to choose. Are we going to be like the heroes of the scriptures in the early church? Or are we going to be like the collaborators? Are we going to follow Christ to Calvary and stand and, if need be, lay down our lives for what is true? Are we going to follow the example of Hobby Lobby? Or are we just going to get comfortable and collaborate with the enemy? Well, friend, I encourage you to go to our website to learn more. Everything on the website is free. Just watch where you send your money. Find out what people are really doing, not what buttons they're pushing, and invest your money wisely in the fight for justice.